Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So you might have seen my previous video about the different Amazon IT positions that are available. So in today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to find these positions, how to land them, how to prepare your resume, and how to be successful in the role. So obviously the first step to land these type of jobs is to find them. So you might look on Indeed, Monster.com, job portals like that. But I think the best way to find these jobs and apply these jobs is to go direct to the source. So the URL is amazon.jobs. So if you go to amazon.jobs and want to find local IT positions, the easiest way in the search is to type in OTS. So OTS is the organization that these jobs belong to. So I was before part of the OTS group. I had different Amazon IT jobs. I started as an IT support associate 2, and then I became an engineer 1. Right now I moved down to a different role, but I'm trying to help you guys to land these type of jobs. So if you haven't seen my previous video, I explained what these jobs actually consist of and what a day in a life of an IT support associate 2, IT engineer 1 actually looks like. So yeah, right now we're going to take a look at these jobs on amazon.jobs, like I mentioned, and we'll see what type of requirements are for these types of roles and how to land these type of jobs. So what I did is went on amazon.jobs, like I mentioned, and all I did was typed in OTS. So if you type in OTS, you get all the local IT positions that Amazon offers. So like I mentioned, IT support engineer 1, IT support engineer 2, IT support associate 2. So these teams have been kind of restructuring lately, and they're using some off-site remote support now. So besides these local IT positions, you can get a help desk position that you help users remotely. So the job titles will still be the same: IT support associate 2, IT engineer 1, but instead of a local site, you will see virtual. And from there, you help users remotely to troubleshoot their scanners, printers, computers, whatever the issue may be, you will help remotely. But right now, we're just going to look at the actual local IT positions that you will help users, directly in person. So yeah, I typed in OTS and I see all these types of jobs. So IT support associate 2 is the entry-level position. There's also IT coordinator, equipment coordinator, but it doesn't really belong to the OTS family. It belongs to operations. So if you're a IT equipment coordinator, you're actually part of operations. And I think if you have some sort of like IT knowledge and or school certificates, IT support associate 2 is a great way to start. So we're going to take a look at this IT support associate 2 role for OTS. And I'm just looking anywhere. This one's in Pennsylvania. So about this role, as an IT support associate 2, will use your skills to support operations team in resolving technical problems of Amazon operations facility in a defined geographical area span across multiple technical disciplines. So these roles, you might have a certain site that you support. You will get a location, but from there, you might also support different sites within that main site. So you will be part of a bigger site, but if like a smaller delivery site, Amazon delivery site needs help, you will travel there and help them out. And Amazon reimburses you for mileage, so it's not a big deal to go to a nearby site and help them out. You get that mileage, reimbursed, and, you get to get out of the warehouse for a little bit and go to a different place and help some users out. So key responsibilities is troubleshooting of IT equipment, handling support requests, procedures across the network, assisting in training new hires, continuous learning of new technologies, supporting customers from multiple buildings and areas, as well as remote customers. Like I mentioned, you will have a ticket queue, but it will not just be your site. You will support other sites within the region. And some of these smaller sites, you don't have to make a daily visit or anything like that. It might be like a weekly or a monthly visit. So it's not a big deal to travel to these sites. And yeah, moving up to 49 pounds. Some of the slam printers that they use to print these labels are kind of big and bulky. They weigh about 50 pounds. That's why they mention you might have to lift 50 pounds. There's also UPSs that are used if the power goes out, so network equipment doesn't go out. Those are pretty heavy. So that's why it kind of mentions you should be able to lift 49 pounds. But usually you have other teammates to help you team lift so you don't get injured or anything like that. And yeah, like I mentioned, traveling within your local regional area to support our customers. So yeah, basic qualifications. 1 year of corporate setting, Windows, Mac, Linux operating system experience troubleshooting integrated independent computer systems, experience maintaining Zebra firmware printers, troubleshooting thin clients, PCs, scanners, portable handheld terminals. So yeah, these are the basic things you would do is supporting operations. So in these warehouses, you have thin clients that kind of have like slideshows for associates, like safety tips or meetings. These thin clients just display different types of information. They're just plugged into a screen, and operations can update what the thin client displays and kind of give, these associates that work at this warehouse kind of information for the day. And obviously, PCs are, used throughout operations, all have laptops, and then there's some desktop computers for different types of, things. But majority, thin client, there's more thin clients. The actual PCs operations walks around with their laptop. So that's why you might support PCs. And yeah, scanners, portable handheld terminals. So yeah, they use a lot of different Dolphin devices to scan different QR codes, barcodes, things of that sort. These just run Android. So if you're familiar with Android, you will do just fine with that. And yeah, Zebra thermal printers, like we mentioned, these printers print all the barcodes. So yeah, when you get your package from Amazon, you have that barcode, a Zebra printer printed that. And yeah, preferred qualifications, A+, Network Plus, CCNA, Linux, hardware installation, AWS, and other industry relevant certifications. So you don't need all these certs. Like I mentioned, this IT support associate 2 role is more of an entry level. I think out of these certs, you should have A+. So if you're applying to these jobs and you're not getting an interview or anything like that, nobody's responding to you, I would get the A+ certification. That's the most important one. And you could also get Network Plus. So if you have your CCNA, I would recommend becoming Engineer 1. A lot of Engineer 1s on Amazon have their CCNA because most of the network devices in these warehouses are Cisco. So that's why you would have CCNA. Some of these warehouses are kind of moving towards Juniper now. So having different types of network knowledge is important. But like I mentioned, Engineer 1 should have that over Associate 2. So yeah, with this role, you should have some sort of industry experience, or if you worked at a certain job and you did some sort of IT, or you helped out IT, or you did anything, you kind of have to cater your resume to that. So if you worked, I don't know, at a clothing retail store and you were troubleshooting the POS system sometimes, I would put that on your resume. If you had some sort of Zebra scanners, Dolphin scanners, TC57s at your retail store, and you knew how to fix basic issues with that, connecting to Wi-Fi, restarting it, something like that, I would kind of cater your resume to this role. So kind of spin your previous role, previous experience, what you've learned to this role. And yet you don't need to have a bachelor's degree, but it helps. So if you have a bachelor's degree in IT, you have a good chance of getting this, but you also should have some sort of experience. So like I mentioned, if you have retail, experience, you were troubleshooting these portable scanners, and you have a bachelor's degree in IT, you're probably going to get an interview for this. But if not, cater your resume to this, and I think you will get an interview. So yeah, the higher up role is the IT support engineer 1 role. Here you need to focus more on networking experience. You have some sort of business networking experience. The associates 2 role kind of deals with more operations, and like we read, troubleshooting PCs, troubleshooting scanners, things of that sort. But the engineer 1, obviously, there's still able to do everything an associate 2 does, but also have to deal with the network a lot more. So an engineer 1 is also on call. So you might get paged in the middle of the night to fix an issue at an Amazon warehouse because, a switch went down, a router went down, and you have to travel there and try and figure out what happened. If the switch is dead, you should be able to replace it, flash firmware configuration on it, attach it to the Amazon network, and kind of get the site back up and running as quick as possible. So if you have any sort of skills like that, you did labs at school that kind of dealt with networking, or like we mentioned, CCNA, you did some virtual labs, things of that sort. Put that on your resume that you're familiar with, basic networking, or maybe more advanced networking. Whatever networking knowledge you have, put that on your resume if you want to get an engineer 1 position. And yet, the next role would be engineer 2. But if you're an engineer 2, you should have a lot of experience. You should have CCNA. I think most engineer 2s when I was in that role had CCNA. So you should have A+, Network Plus, CCNA, industry experience, and education. So yeah, the engineer 2 position is kind of the highest position with the local IT. So you're going to be an escalation point for all the engineer 1s that can't figure out different issues with the network. So you should know your stuff. It's not an entry-level position. But the thing with Amazon, so if you actually get an interview, you go through the interview process and you're interviewing for an engineer 1, but you might be lacking in something they're asking, or maybe there was a candidate that kind of did better than you, and they'll rather have that person as engineer 1 instead of you. They will offer you an associate 2 position if it's available. I think it's a good way. When I interviewed for Amazon, I interviewed for an engineer 1 position, and they offered me an associate 2 position. But from there, I kind of learned as quick as possible, and within a year, I was an engineer 1. So it's possible. Don't be discouraged if you're offered an associate 2 position. Just take it, grind, learn as much as you can, volunteer for all the projects, volunteer for whatever your manager might need, help other sites, and you can get to that next level. So let's say you applied already, you catered your resume to these roles, and, a recruiter reaches out to you that we're going to start the interview process. So what things you should kind of be prepared for? So the first step is either going to be a phone interview or a virtual interview. So the phone interview is about 15 to 30 minutes, let's say, and they're going to ask you some technical questions. They're going to be very basic technical questions, like what's the difference between a switch and a router? What is DNS? What is TCP IP? Things like that, basic networking IT questions. And from there, they're also going to ask you more of leadership principle questions. So if you're not familiar with Amazon, they have something that's called leadership principles. So Google it, look it up. So leadership principles are things Amazon and Jeff Bezos kind of came up with to innovate and deliver to the customer. So things like bias for action, customer obsession. So when you're kind of working day to day at Amazon, somebody might throw that out to you that whatever you're doing is not thinking about customer obsession. And they're going to tell you, we need to do this to be customer obsessed. Or, whatever you're doing is not presenting bias for action. So we need to do something right away. So be very familiar with these. And if you can you don't have to throw them out by name during an interview, but kind of know what types of things go into that. So you might tell a scenario where a user had a broken computer, and the normal procedure is for them to contact remote support, and if remote support can't figure it out, then you figure it out. But you wanted to fix that user's computer right away to help them, get to the meeting and present, some sort of plan they have for the business. So that would be an example of bias for action. Instead of, referring them to remote support, you'll help them, and that was bias for action and customer obsession. So think of scenarios like that, because when they ask you on this phone interview, Tell me about a time you dealt with a difficult customer and how did you handle it. You have to come up with a scenario. You have to answer in the STAR method, which you tell them about a certain scenario. Try and be detailed as possible. You can tell them, hey, when I worked at Kohl's, I was IT at Kohl's and I had a user that was very aggravated. And how did you handle that situation? Be very detailed, have specific examples. And if you can accomplish that, you will get the role. So like we mentioned, the first part is going to be a phone screen. So you're going to have some leadership questions, like we mentioned, tell me about a difficult interaction with a customer, and you will have some technical questions. They'll be very basic, very quick. It's nothing. It's kind of weed out the people that don't exhibit leadership principles and don't have any IT knowledge. So the next, I'll let you guys know. So it's going to be either a phone interview or there's going to be a virtual interview. So the second option from that, a virtual interview, you're going to turn on your webcam, you're going to turn on your computer, and the computer is going to ask you these questions, and you're going to record yourself answering these questions. So it's going to be the same thing. They kind of use that when they don't have somebody available to call you and ask you these questions. You're going to answer them, record yourself, and then somebody from the team will watch your responses. It will be the same thing, and they'll grade you and decide if you exhibit the skills to be working for Amazon. So let's say you got through this, 30-minute interview, and what are the next steps? So the recruiter is going to reach out to you, and they're going to schedule some interviews with you. It might be 1 day, it might be 2 days, depending on people's schedule. But let's say it was a 1-day interview. The recruiter might also host some type of training how to do good in this interview. So when I interviewed, I had a recruiter call first. There was, let's say, like 15 people on the call, and the recruiter explained to answer each question in the STAR method, and they explained to kind of study and what things to study. So they're going to kind of prep you to be successful in this interview. So it's interview day, and you're going to get a list of who's going to interview you. So on each interview, you're going to have 1 to 2 people. So it's going to be divided into 2 parts. It might be 3 parts too. I'll explain. So if it's in 2 parts, you're going to have half your day is going to be leadership principles, and the other half is going to be technical questions. And if there's a third part, sometimes the manager has a separate interview with you. So leadership principle questions. So you already passed the phone screen. It's going to be more of those type of questions. It's going to be a lot of questions. It's going to be close to an hour. I think it's 45 minutes. And it's just going to be nonstop. So, you're going to get through one type of question. There's going to be another and another. So be prepared. Have a lot of scenarios in your head. Have multiple scenarios for multiple types of questions. So it's good to write down these scenarios that happened to you in your past career, or it might be even at school. It doesn't even have to be your professional career. Let's say at school, you were working at the help desk, and you can have some scenarios from that. So yeah, leadership types of questions are going to be, like I mentioned, tell me about a difficult interaction you had with a customer, or tell me about a time a customer wanted something that will not solve their need, and how did you handle it? So it's going to be those types of questions. So yeah, have plenty of scenarios. Write them down so you kind of can think of them. I don't know if you're a visual person or not, but what I did is I wrote down all these scenarios I had in my head on Post-it, so I kind of remember them. It's kind of similar to what I do with YouTube videos. So instead of writing a script, I'm going to write down things I want to talk about, and it's kind of better in my head that way. I don't have to look at it the whole time, but I remember what types of scenarios I had for this interview. So you're going to get through this. It's going to be 1 to 2 people on there. It might be just one person asking you questions, or 2 people. Sometimes they have people shadowing, and the person who's shadowing to answer to be an interviewer in the future, they might ask a couple questions. So the people that are going to be interviewing you are actually going to be people that are in similar roles. So it's going to be your peers. They're most likely not going to be from the region you're applying to. They might be from a different region, but they're going to be engineer 1s, engineer 2s. So they're already doing this job, and at the end of the interview, they usually leave like 15 minutes so you can ask them any types of questions. And they're working in this role, so they're going to be a good resource if you have any questions. So the next part is going to be the technical interview. It's also going to be 1 to 2 people on that panel, and they're going to ask you different questions. So the questions they're going to ask you are going to be divided into 3 different parts. So it's going to be Microsoft, Linux, and networking. So before they start these categories, they'd like to ask you, how would you rate yourself from 1 to 10 on your networking? How would you rate yourself 1 to 10 on Microsoft? And how would you rate yourself 1 to 10 on Linux? So if you say you're a 10 in networking, they're going to ask you some tough questions. If you say you're a 10 in Linux, they're going to ask you the toughest Linux questions. They're gonna, because you're saying you're an expert in that. So be realistic, answer truthfully. If you're not very familiar, but you know a little bit of Linux, say you're like a 4, a 3, and this gives them an idea what types of questions they can ask you. Because if you say you're a 10 in all of them, they're going to ask you tough ones. You're not going to know anything, and you're going to fail the interview. So make sure to be honest and kind of gauge yourself beforehand. Kind of think about, how am I with Linux? How am I with Microsoft? And how am I with networking? So if you're an associate 1, you should be great in at least one of these. If you're an engineer 1, you should be great in at least 2 of these. And if you're an engineer 2, you should be great in all of them. So make sure you do good, at least, obviously, depending on the role you're interviewing for. You got to be pretty good in a couple of these or all of them, depending on the role you're interviewing for. So some of the questions they're probably going to ask you are, what is DHCP? What is CDP? What is a VLAN? What is the job of firewall? Things of that. They're going to ask you how to access the registry, what types of things can you change in a registry, what is a registry used for. Linux, they're going to ask you, different Linux questions. They're going to ask you what type of command would you run in Linux to do this. Just basic Linux things. So have some commands memorized. Know what the difference is between su and sudo. Why would you use one over the other? So kind of, be familiar with Linux, be familiar with Windows, and be familiar with networking. So yeah, they're going to ask you, for example, Microsoft Outlook, what is the extension of the file that holds your emails? Things of that sort. So they're not going to ask you, how to open a folder on Windows or anything like that. Obviously, those are like basic questions. They're going to ask you things that would come into play on your daily life at Amazon as IT. For example, somebody's mailbox is corrupted and how to fix it. For example, a thin client isn't working and you have to follow documentation to run different commands in Linux to fix it. But you kind of have to have some sort of understanding how Linux works and what type of commands to type in to follow the wiki you might have for that type of thin client. So obviously study, learn all these, make sure to know the OSI model. That's a big one. They're going to ask you about the OSI model 100%. So know each layer of the OSI model and describe what type of that layer of the OSI model, which, have some real world examples of each layer of the OSI model. And you have the third interview with the manager. The manager will probably ask you some leadership types of questions too. They're probably not going to ask you any IT questions. So it depends. Sometimes the manager wants to meet the candidate. Sometimes the manager will be in an actual, one of the first part or second part of the interview, not the third part. Sometimes they're going to have their own time with you. It just depends on the manager and how they want to do things. From there, you finished all your interviews. So all the people that interview you, they're going to meet on a call and they're going to discuss how you did in each part. So they're going to grade you how you did on Microsoft, how you did on networking, and how you did on Linux, and how you did with leadership. So each of those interviewers, for example, like we mentioned, if there's two on each panel, they're going to either vote yes or no if you're a good candidate or not, and they're going to give specific examples why they think you're raising the bar. So if you're an external candidate and you're applying for these IT positions, you have to raise the bar. So if somebody internal is interviewing for this, they have to meet the bar. So Amazon kind of believes if you're coming from the outside, you have to be better than the current people in the role. So you're raising the bar, and from then on, somebody leaves Amazon, the next person is raising the bar, raising the bar, raising the bar. And by doing this, the Amazon employees are constantly better, better, better. And from there, Amazon can innovate and grow as they've been for years. So yeah, they're all going to vote and decide if you're a good candidate. So the two people on the technical part are going to vote, and the two people on the leadership are going to vote. And if you have the separate manager interview, they're also going to vote. And from there, they're going to decide if you should get the job or not. So like I mentioned, for the technical part, you have to be good at either all of them, one of them, or two of them. So for example, if you interviewed for the engineer one position and you weren't pretty good, you didn't raise the bar on two categories, but you only raised the bar on one category, they might recommend just to offer you an IT support associate 2 role. So from there, they're going to say, hey, you didn't meet the bar, raise the bar for this position, but we could offer you this one because I think you're a great candidate for this position. So don't be discouraged, but that's how it's going to look. And the leadership questions, you have to be good at those. So I guess you could be excellent at all three in your interview, all three for the technical ones, and you're interviewing for an IT associate 2 role, and you're kind of so-so with the leadership questions. They might take you, but they kind of believe anyone who gets a job at Amazon has to be good at leadership questions, has to think about the customer always, and kind of through their daily job, kind of have to exhibit leadership. So if you're not good at that, you're probably not going to get any role at Amazon. So make sure to have good scenarios. Make sure you can have detailed examples of these different scenarios they might. Sorry about that. My camera died. But yeah, make sure to brush up on these leadership questions. Make sure to Google what types of questions you will be asked. By Googling, you can kind of find some types of questions you will be asked in this interview. And I hope you guys do good. I think Amazon IT is a great place to start. And if you kind of stay with Amazon and do IT with them for a while, you can move to different types of roles like software development, networking, optical engineer, whatever you might go with. And Amazon kind of encourages for you to keep on growing, keep on studying. So in your daily role, if you have nothing to do, they encourage you to study for certification, go to school. They have great programs to pay for your schooling. So they offer a certain amount of money for you after you've been there for a certain amount of months, that you can get your bachelor's, you can get your associates, you can get certificates. By being with OTS, you can expense some of these certificates, so they will send you an email of what types of certificates they pay for. So how that kind of works, you sign up for, let's say, a Network Plus certificate, you study for it, you let Amazon know you're doing that certificate, and then when you pass, you take your receipt that you paid whatever Network Plus costs these days, and you expense it, and they return you that money. So if you fail, obviously they're not gonna give you back the cost of the cert, but if you pass, they're gonna refund you that money. So it's basically a free certification. So Amazon IT is a great place to learn, grow, and from there, if you're going to the Google, Microsoft, you can kind of put that you did Amazon IT, and they know how grueling the interview process is for these fan companies. So you might have a better chance at, landing a gig at Microsoft, Google. And if Amazon's paying for your school, you can get a bachelor's degree, get all these certs, and then you look like a way better candidate for a Google position. So Like I mentioned, I worked for OTS before. I started as an associate 2, and then I went to engineer 1. So if you guys have any specific questions on what's it like to work at these warehouses, delivery stations, Amazon Fresh stores, put them in the comments, and I'll make another video answering you guys' questions. Thanks a lot. Hope you guys tune back to whatever video I make next. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.